friends, my name is Katie. Welcome back to my channel. The end of February is just around the corner. I can't believe it. We did have an extra day this year, right? Because of leap year. I'm gonna post this on Saturday, hopefully. We're still in the month of February, but the month of February, I've kind of been doing a secret TBR. And I'm not quite finished with it as of this recording. It's Thursday afternoon today, and I'm still in the midst of 2 books. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to finish them both in February. They might bleed over a little bit into middle grade March. I'm hoping, crossing my fingers, that I can get them done. But I did manage to read like 4 other things this month that I'd really like to share with you. So even though my secret TBR video isn't going to come out until probably maybe a week into March, I'm still gonna let you know the other things that I read. And the reason I was able to read other things is because I nurse my baby in the middle of the night and I don't wanna wake up my husband, so I read on my Kindle. I read 2 Kindle books this month, and then I also listened to an audiobook that actually technically I'm not quite finished with, but I'm at like 95% of the book and I'm reading, it's only the epilogue left, so I've pretty much read it. So I'm gonna talk about it because I feel like I've read enough to talk about. Was that enough explanation? Let's just talk about the books that I read. Okay, so first I'm gonna talk about the Kindle books that I read, and I'm gonna start with a book called A Fall of Marigolds, and I actually happen to have a physical copy because after I finished A Fall of Marigolds, I needed my own copy because I loved it so much. There's a number of reasons why I loved it so much, and part of that reason is that my daughter's name is Marigold, and Marigold is in the title of the book, which has nothing to do with the contents of the book other than it dealt with a scarf that had marigolds on it, and then there's a florist in the book who talks about marigolds being a resilient flower, which I really loved that quote, and it made me think of my own little marigold and how I hope that that is true of her as well. This is an historical fiction novel, and it's a dual timeline historical fiction novel, which is very in vogue with historical fiction novels these days. Susan Meissner is a very popular historical fiction novelist. This is my first book that I've read by her, but I own one other book. I can't remember the title of it. But anyway, I'm dying now to read more by her because I just love this one so much. This tells the dual timeline story, first of Clara Wood, who survives the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire in September of 1911, and then it also tells the story of Taryn Michaels, who survives the collapse of the World Trade Centers in September of 2001. I actually loved both stories equally, although we do spend more time with Clara in 1911 than we do with Taryn. And of course there is a point of connection with these 2 women, and it happens to be this scarf covered in marigolds. It's a beautiful story of resiliency. It depicts heart-wrenching tragedy and also how that tragedy can go on to affect your life so that you're not really living afterwards, which is totally understandable, but how then do you come out of that? How then are you able to learn to thrive once again? And I just really, really loved it. The other story that I read on my Kindle was called The Simple Wild. It's a contemporary romance novel, and I really enjoyed that one as well. So much so that I went out and got myself a physical copy of the follow-up book, which just came out a few days ago, so I pre-ordered this. I never pre-order books, and I've pre-ordered 2 books this year already, but I pre-ordered Wild at Heart. The first one, like I said, is called The Simple Wild. I just am a sucker for books that take place in Alaska. I love Alaska as a setting. It always becomes a character in and of itself. The Simple Wild tells the story of Calla, whose mother fell in love with a bush pilot in Alaska, but she was not built for life in Alaska, and her husband was only built for life in Alaska. So they went their separate ways. Calla had a very strained relationship with her father, and so she's living her life in Toronto, and she finds out that her father is dying of cancer, and so she decides to go and spend some time with him in Alaska, and it's about her time in Alaska. It's a hate-to-love romance with one of her father's employees, who's also a bush pilot named Jonah. I will say the romance is not closed door, so there are some open door scenes, although I would say that the book is about so much more than that aspect of the romance. I feel like Her characters are very fleshed out. You get to know them so well, and you care about these characters so much, or at least I did as I was reading them. Calla isn't particularly likable at the beginning of the book, and I will also say that Jonah wasn't particularly likable at the beginning of the book as well. He's really mean to Calla, and I didn't like that. But, you know, you are persuaded by the end of the book to care for both of them, as well as Calla's father, and I really liked it. And, you know, maybe it's because I'm reading the book at like 3 in the morning and I'm a little bit delusional, but I get so wrapped up in this story. I don't know. I guess I'm a romance gal now. Who knew? I don't know what else to say about that book. It's not like it was the most brilliantly written book ever. It was just a lot of fun. And I say a lot of fun, but actually there's aspects of that book that are really sad too, and brought me to tears because I become an emotional mess at 3 in the morning as well. All right, I will talk about The First 4 Years by Laura Ingalls Wilder. This was the final book in my Laura Ingalls Wilder reread. I'm very happy to move on because there's other books in the Little House on the Prairie world that I'd really like to read. One is Caroline, which is a book written from Ma's perspective, and then I also really want to read a nonfiction book about Laura Ingalls Wilder called Prairie Fires that won the Pulitzer a couple years ago. I've heard that it's amazing and I really want to read it. So that's actually the reason that I reread all these books, was because of that book. The First 4 Years was probably my least favorite book in the series. Laura died before she was able to complete this book, and actually the first 20 pages or so retell the end of these happy golden years, and they retell it in a way that's not as good as in these happy golden years. I don't know if that makes sense. But I didn't like this book as much. It doesn't feel like a finished book. In fact, I'm not sure there was actually a whole lot of editing that happened. It's almost more like her notes. And yes, they're beautifully written notes about the first 4 years of Laura's marriage to Almanzo, who she calls Manly in this book. And it's really tragic. Like, every year of the first 4 years of their marriage is defined by tragedy. And while lots of sad things happen in the other books in the series, this one felt more depressing than those, which is honestly probably more realistic because I do know that Laura Ingalls Wilder, she sugarcoated a lot of her stories, or maybe Rose did, because I know her daughter Rose was very involved in the writing of these books as well. So yes, my least favorite of the series was this one, but I'm still glad that I read it. This is kind of a silly thing to note, but I really like that Laura called Almanzo Manly in this book. I think that's a really sweet nickname, but that has nothing to do with my enjoyment of the book, just a little aside. And then finally, the book that I read on audiobook is The Only Plane in the Sky, An Oral History of 9/11 by Garrett Graff. Interesting that 2 of the books I read this month had to do with 9/11. That was completely unintentional. I listened to this book on audio, but I do have a physical copy that the publisher sent me back in September because I'm pretty sure this was published around the anniversary of 9/11. But I loved listening to the audiobook because it's a full person cast. There's like 45 people who narrate the book, because like I said, this is an oral history. So if you look at the format of this book, it's these little, how do I describe this? Every paragraph is sort of someone else's reflection about the day, and it starts the day before 9/11, and then the afterword, which I'm reading or listening to right now, goes into the days and months after 9/11. It is so heart-wrenching. I can't tell you how many times I was listening to this book just weeping because it's just so filled with emotion. It gives you so much immersive insight into the day, which obviously is incredibly hard to listen to and read about. This is not by any stretch of the imagination an easy read. Obviously, I don't think anyone would go into this book thinking that it's going to be lighthearted. It's not. It was such an emotionally draining, tragic read, but so amazingly told. The man who put this together, Garrett Graff, did an incredible job of gathering all these voices and telling the narrative story of 9/11 in a way that brought it to life, because you're hearing the words of these people who lived through it. I would say that the most affecting stories told are those of the first responders and the survivors from the Twin Towers and also from the Pentagon, but you do get sort of 3,000-mile view of it as well, from the political leaders who were also dealing with the repercussions of the event, because it was very confusing. There were very few people who knew what was happening while it was happening. And so their experience of that confusion, the confusion of the day, is very visceral. All of the stories told, whether they were experiencing it on the ground at the sites of the terrorist attacks, or whether they were experiencing it because they had to deal with the aftermath, it's all affecting. Anyway, yeah, I'm so glad to have read this book. This book was incredible. I highly recommend you pick it up if you're looking for a really intimate, inside, deeply personal look at 9/11 and the experiences of the people who were most deeply affected by it. It was incredible. I listened to this through Libro FM, which I feel like I probably should mention because I am a Libro FM listening squad member. Oh my goodness, I can't listen to her screaming like that. She took a terrible nap. Didn't you, Miss Marigold? So I'm a Libro FM listening squad member, which all that means is that I have a link for you to use if you're interested in Libro FM to try out their subscription service. You get 3 books for the price of 1. I do not judge if you use Amazon or Audible. I get books from Amazon on occasion, but I love the opportunity to support my local bookstore. So if you are interested in checking out Libro FM, I do have a link below. Like I said, it's not an affiliate link. I don't get money for it, but I want to let you know about it because I love Libro FM. It has turned me into an audiobook listener, and I didn't think that was possible. And I think that's all. I hope that you all had a great reading month in February. I had a great reading month. I read way more books than I thought was possible for such a short month. I don't really know what to attribute that to. Keep a lookout for my secret TBR video that'll be going up in a couple weeks, or maybe just a week. We'll see when I get that video edited. And let me know if you're participating in Middle Grade March. Middle Grade March starts tomorrow. If you have a TBR, let me know what you're reading. And as a reminder, you only need to read one book, one middle grade book to participate. So no excuses, friends. I'd love for you to participate because good middle grade can and should be enjoyed by people of all ages. Happy end of February. Happy March, everyone. I'll talk to you later. Bye.